All right, welcome back to the State of the Lakers podcast, everyone. The Lakers just wrapped up a deflating loss against the Knicks. They fell to them at Madison Square Garden 96 to 111. I wouldn't say it was the worst game they played, but we were all on such a high from that Nets win that the reality check really kind of set in. It was a pretty competitive first half, but the third quarter became such a shit show, and it really doomed us. Credit to the Knicks and Julius Randle, our little boy from the 2015-16 Lakers, the Jim Buss era. Julius Randle, their defense, and especially in the paint, they were kind of our biggest downfalls. The Lakers just had a lot of problems with turnovers tonight, and I thought the Knicks pretty much deserved this win. They were fighting for it all the way through. Though I will say, if Frank made some smarter lineup decisions, in my opinion, I thought this game was winnable for us. But to talk about it with me is a dude that I love talking Lakers with, my buddy Phil. You've heard him on the podcast before. How's it going, man? How you doing?
Hey man, what's going on? I'm doing all right.
Eh, I'm kind of tired, but down to talk some Lakers, man. What'd you think of the game? Let me get your thoughts first.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't expect after the Nets win for the Lakers to come in and take this one because the Knicks are a much tougher defensive team than they've been in years. Um, and Julius Randle, let's be honest, had a bone to pick. Like he was leaning into the matchup with Kyle Kuzma a lot of the night, trying to make a point. And he
Especially in the
did.
first.
Yep, exactly. So the loss itself wasn't that unexpected to me because these Knicks, like the Knicks have become a punchline in the league for a long time, but these guys are not to be joked with. Like they're a hard-nosed defensive team.
Hmm.
They don't have a dominant offensive talent, but they can keep you from scoring enough to win on any given night. So credit to them for this win. We move on to the next one. It was an emotional win a couple nights ago. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
that win a couple nights ago certainly felt good, man. I was still riding on a high from that, and I knew coming in that the Nets defense was going to be. I mean, the Knicks defense was going to be tougher. So it's all about matchups, man. I knew that if they're going to be tougher defensively, and if a guy like Julius has a bone to pick, in the NBA, man, it seems like the storyline always kind of carries out. If a guy is playing his old team and he's playing well, he's I'd say like 80% of the time he's usually going to have a good game. Even like Mark we saw against the Raptors, I thought, oh, there might be a chance for him to have a good game because his minutes are inconsistent on the Lakers, but he's also going against his old team, his old coach. And Mark had his best game of the season against the freaking Raptors. And look at Julius tonight. He had like 10 rebounds, 34 points. They were really nuts, man. Yeah, I'll go through the game real quick if you weren't able to catch it. So Julius Randle started out hot. He was like 4 for 4 on his jumpers. Knicks were protecting the paint pretty well, especially in comparison to the Nets, man. We got Andre Drummond versus LaMarcus Aldridge just pushing him around. That was great to see. But the Knicks, dude, Thibodeau just does a great job of instilling a defensive spirit in his guys, and that was really apparent from the get go, from the first quarter. Second quarter, we were having a tough time generating looks, I'd say. The Knicks defense is still kind of locked in, but our passes were just getting picked. That's been the story of a lot of games since LeBron went down.
Yeah,
Cruz and THT were the main ball handlers, but in the second quarter, I thought that's when Taj Gibson started to really bully us in the paint. And then I just saw Trez, he's got like 3 less inches on him. Trez is a strong guy for his size, but Taj Gibson is just bigger, man. And I was just kind of wondering myself, is Frank going to roll with Mark? Because this is the time you got to do it, man. I was giving Frank the benefit of the doubt in that first shift. I'm like, I know you got to play Trez, so play Trez, but let's see if it changes anyway in the third quarter. But in that second quarter, Schroeder and Drummond come back in. We start falling down by like 10, but Schroeder and Drummond, they bring some kind of stability, and that was good to see. But we still had way too many turnovers. Anyways, going to the third quarter, that's when things really start to unravel for us. Turnovers, man. I keep saying it. Drummond giving up baskets a little too easily at the rim, and Trez really getting out muscled by Gibson in the paint. We really lost the battle of the paint in that third quarter, and I thought that kind of spelled doom for us. And skipping ahead to the fourth, Mark actually checks back in, and I was surprised. Were you surprised to see Mark come in the fourth?
not so much because Vogel has been. They were close enough in the fourth quarter at the beginning that if Mark had brought a particular spark to play, like I see what Vogel was going for there. I think that Vogel's rotations have been scrutinized in a very particular way. I'm going to get up on my soapbox a little bit here, so get ready for that.
Go for it.
Yeah. But Vogel's rotations this season have been scrutinized in a very particular way that they were also last season. And I think that what we're seeing a lot of this season, and we saw this through almost all of the regular season last year as well, is that Vogel does not approach regular season games with the idea of I am going to maximize my chance of winning this particular game in every single game. He approaches his rotations and his strategic decisions in a very experimental, like data gathering sort of way, where I'm going to see what these particular lineups can do against this kind of competition, because their goal is the playoffs. Ultimately, they know this team is going to be in the playoffs no matter what happens, no matter whether they win on any given night, because at the end of the day, LeBron and Anthony Davis are going to be back and they're going to be here for, at worst case scenario, the play in. So what Vogel is doing is gathering data, and he's not putting in Marc Gasol as much as I think he would in those kinds of playoff situations where Marc would be called for, because he knows a lot more about Marc than he does about Montrezl Harrell and Andre Drummond in these particular defensive situations. And I think that Vogel is just putting them in these high stakes situations and gathering data.
I'm with you on that because I try and put myself in the shoes of Vogel, who is a now championship winning coach and a defensive specialist. You'd call him easily one of the best defensive coaches in the league. He's got to know Trez's defensive limitations. He's got to know how Marc helps right there. So I feel like he knew what he was doing there too. But we talk about maximize, and I'm still kind of frustrated why he wouldn't want to put Marc in there a little bit earlier, just because the games do kind of mean more than they did last year. Because last year we're at the top of the standings. Bron and AD were relatively healthy. We just don't know where things are going to go. But it is the same kind of Vogel that we were seeing last year. You're right. He's experimenting with lineups. And I can't help but think he just wants to get guys reps because we don't know what kind of situations we'll face in the playoffs. We don't know who might go down. So guys might need to work on their weaknesses a little bit now. And yeah, Trez's weaknesses were certainly apparent against that Gibson matchup tonight, man.
Yeah, they were.
Mm-hmm. A stat that jumped out to me was we lost the rebounding battle 47-33, and we lost the offensive rebounding battle 4-15. So that wasn't really surprised if you're watching the game throughout and just seeing how, because clearly the paint, both in scoring and in defensively, the paint is where the Knicks thrive. You know, they're like a mid-level team now, and so that's also the same place we thrive. But they just got that battle tonight because hey, we're still underhanded, but this was like a 10-point-ish loss for us. I'm also not too surprised that we lost just because it's all about matchups, man. The Knicks have a better defense than the Nets did. And also, we were just shooting kind of crazy from three in that Nets game. What do you think of the way Drummond played for us tonight? I want to get your thoughts on that.
Drummond, I actually made a joke on Twitter earlier tonight about Andre Drummond being like Jimmy Kimmel from an episode where he's being mobbed by like 5 ninjas with electric pokey sticks. Because that's what they were doing to Drummond all night.
They pretty much
like Thibs acknowledged right away that like, look, without LeBron, without Anthony Davis, their primary, like most effective offensive engine is going to be Andre Drummond. So we're going to send everybody at Andre Drummond every time he touches the ball and makes someone else win. And there were a lot of other guys who had good nights, but at the end of the day, with the kind of intensity the Knicks were playing with, if they took Drummond as effectively out of the game as they did, then they gave themselves a really good chance to win. And that's ultimately what happened because they had guys who were making shots.
Yeah. And Drummond isn't the best with holding on to the ball, as we can see from 3 or 4 games in the Laker uniform now. You know, I feel like once he gets it in the post, it's like a 40% chance that he bobbles it, or you know, it goes between his legs and he has to recapture it again. So, like Eric Spoelstra the other night and attacking Schroeder with those traps, Tibbs knew to just go at Drummond, just kind of just make life harder for him, and it was working. I thought he had a pretty good first half. But in that second half, we got a picture of him on the sideline with like an ice pack on his knee, and he had one of those like massaging machines that was massaging his other thigh. So I wonder if health came into play, if he was feeling some kind of ailment. But I thought in that second half, he kind of just lost that tenacity. I thought he looked pretty good in the first half, but I don't know whether to chalk it up to being hurt or tired. But I'm not going to put too much stock into this game because it wasn't a good game for him. So I'm still looking forward to how he's looking at these upcoming games that we'll have without LeBron and AD. The Knicks were just a bad matchup for us. We lost the battle in the paint. You know what else was crazy, man? It was going around on Twitter, but Kuz, when it was a 3-point game at halftime, Kuz was like minus 20. Did you see that?
I did see that, which is kind of funny because I also thought that Kuz was having a pretty good game in the first half.
I thought so too. I think everyone on Twitter, the general consensus was, yeah. But what do you think when you saw that?
Well, when I saw that, my first thought was that's kind of a sign of the limitation of the plus minus as a statistic. Because he was also playing head to head against Julius Randle, who was, having himself a game at that point as well. And there are a lot of the thing about catch-all statistics like plus minus is that they catch things that other statistics don't, but it's hard to tell exactly what it is they are and are not catching. And
Yeah.
so any given one game plus minus, I think, ought to be taken with a very large grain of salt.
I always take it with a grain of salt. Yeah. But I do like to keep an eye on it just for crazy kind of things that jump out at you like that. Kuz would finish with minus 26 on the night, but he was by far, the worst in terms of plus minus. But I thought that probably belonged to Trez with how badly he was getting killed by Taj and on those rebounds by those putbacks. Trez was the second worst at minus 12, but yeah, that Kuzma minus 26 really jumped out at me. Trez, one of his worst games of the year, 0 points, 4 boards, 0 for 4, just kind of got out muscled by our boy Gibson. Yeah, I think I'm still wondering why Frank didn't want to roll with Mark. That's kind of what I'm going to think back on this game. Like why didn't Frank want to just mix it up on offense? Have Mark facilitating from the high post, because when Mark did come in the fourth, the defense wasn't great, admittedly, but he did unlock a few things offensively. When he was able to go out to the post, the paint opened up a little bit. The Knicks had to get outside of that densely packed paint. But what do you think of Mark's minutes when he did actually come in? He only played like a handful.
Yeah, they were sort of marginal minutes in the sense that the flow of the game had already been determined and it was late. But I'm a big Marc Gasol fan. I think whenever he comes into the game, he gives a lot to the Lakers, in particular because last year when the Lakers were focused on having a big guy in the middle of the paint who could clog things up defensively, that really hurt their spacing on the offensive end. And Marc Gasol is someone who does not give you that problem because he's a guy who can shoot okay, and he can also distribute from either the high post or the 3-point line. So I always love having Marc Gasol in the game in general because he's a competent rim protector who also doesn't clog up the offense. And I think that that's something we will see an awful lot more in the playoffs and those situational matchups where guys like Andre Drummond are not the correct matchup in the same way that we saw JaVale McGee kind of fall out of playoff rotations last year. But I think that I think Frank Vogel feels like he knows exactly what he can expect from Marc Gasol and what he's going to get, and that he is really stretching and experimenting with some of these other combinations of bigs to see if those combinations can be reliable, and if they can, when are they useful.
That's what I keep going back to too, that kind of same experimenting mindset. Mark, he did just win a championship, and he did look a little bit off in that playoff run last year, according to Raptors fans and even like Celtics fans who were watching that series pretty closely. But I do think Frank does know what he can get from Mark when it really counts. I still have faith, and I love that he's on the team so he can bring that floor spacing and that versatility, that extra little dose of facilitation. But yeah, dude, I think Mark can be really big for us in this playoff run. I want to look ahead to next game, though. We got the Hornets, and if we win that game, we'll go 4-3 on this 7-game road trip that we thought was going to be, so awful for us. But hey, that's a lot better than a lot of us expected. You got any thoughts about that matchup? I should note that they're going to be without LaMelo, of course. They won't have Gordon Hayward, though, and Malik Monk is said to be out as well, while PJ Washington is questionable. What do you think about how that game could go down?
Well, obviously, with them being that shorthanded as well as shorthanded as we are, it seems like a very winnable game because you would expect that if those two teams are being taken down similar amounts, the Lakers are going to have the advantage there. But it's also road trips, especially long road trips, are always tests of endurance. And they had a very, very big high coming off of the win against Brooklyn. They have had what is kind of a disappointment in what was, as you said, a very winnable game against the Knicks. So coming off of a back-to-back with a disappointment, it's going to be, I think, more of a mental test than a test of talent for them to just firm up and see if they can finish the game against guys who aren't standouts, but they're all NBA players. They're really good at basketball, and you have to show up against them. So that's going to be the question: is after this kind of vaguely disappointing loss on a back-to-back, is there the energy to show up and assert the dominance against what should be a lesser team?
Yep, kind of like a game seven, I mean, not the importance of a game seven, but the endurance comes into play. You've been through a lot. Now you just gotta push through the last remnants of this little trip. See if you can push this one out, man. I want to hop back to the game we just saw, though. You think if Mark comes in the third before Trez starts getting killed, like maybe 6 minutes left in the third, do you think the Lakers win that, or you think it's any closer?
I think it's definitely possible, and there are always tactical decisions in regular season games that could be made better. I think that it's maybe a closer and maybe even a more winnable game than it was if Mark comes in a third. I also think that there were more important factors to me in this loss than that particular tactical decision. Julius Randle was given a little bit more space in the half court offense than I would have liked in the first half, which like he had a lot of one-on-one possessions against Kuzma and other guys who he can bump off of because he's such a strong guy. So to me, I would have limited his one-on-one possessions in the first half, and that was probably the most important tactical decision in the loss.
Yeah, I thought Julius was also hitting some really tough shots. We had some good defense on him for the first few possessions, and he was just hitting them. But I didn't expect him to keep hitting them. I was just like, usually when a guy starts that hot, he's not going to continue that all the way up to the fourth quarter. And he got his points, but he wasn't that blazing hot. I do think that could have been good to limit his ISOs, but the first half I was kind of okay with us overall. We ended the half with a little bit of a deficit, but I would like the way we were playing. We just kind of lost energy in the end. That third quarter really doomed us, though.
Yeah, it was not a great quarter. And I want to, while I'm here, I really want to shout out the University of Kentucky graduate Julius Randle, being a Kentucky fan, because he was at Kentucky for one of the best and least likely Kentucky playoff runs I've been witness to back in 2013, 2014. So shout out to Julius Randle.
Shout out to him just for being a great Laker with us, man. We really saw some strides from him, especially in that last contract year. Contract year Randle was the thing, and it was last year too. And this guy got paid, and he's like the main guy for the Knicks now. I'm happy seeing him flourish, man. He was
he's the poster boy for the saying that progress isn't always linear.
Mm-hmm.
Like he made a lot of small strides for several years, and a lot of people gave up on him. But when sometimes for players like Julius Randle, when things click, they click a lot at once. And it's been a particular joy to watch him blossom in a very prominent role in New York.
Yeah, success in general just really isn't linear, man. And you ask successful people that, and they'll always tell you that, like the path to where you want to get isn't always it never is a straight line. And Julius wasn't in the greatest situations, for his own individual flourishment. That last New Orleans year, he was also working through some growing pains and whatnot, but it's good to see our boy who was our first, draft pick in that next era of post-Kobe Lakers. He was honestly my favorite of the young core. Did you have a favorite of that young core between D'Angelo, Ingram, Julius?
I really liked Ingram's game, but because I was a Kentucky fan, Julius was the favorite for me, and I also have like a very particular memory of walking around, like smoking a cigarette outside of my apartment complex in 2014, waiting for the draft picks to come in, like telling the Lakers to freaking pick Randall, and then they did, and it was really pleasant. So that's like I could not be getting more joy out of his success right now. I think he's a great guy. He's a great player, and I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, bro, I was locked into that 2014 draft because right before him, Marcus Smart got picked, and we hadn't had a good point guard in so long. And I was just like, please, Lakers, let Marcus Smart fall to him, fall to us. Nope, we
Well,
didn't get him.
I will admit that I was wrong about Marcus Smart. I was hoping that they would not pick him, but he has turned out to prove me wrong. I was praying initially for Embiid to fall, um,
I,
but
I would have
alas,
loved that
uh,
too, but I didn't
yeah,
think it was going to happen.
yeah, it was a couple picks too far for that to be realistic. But I thought Randall was a good pick at the time, and I'm really happy to see him blossoming into that kind of player that we all saw in him for those first couple years.
hmm One of my first fantasy basketball team names was Handles Like Randall, and I won the championship that year. I know. I was
Yep,
like, I got
yep.
to make my team name genius. Yeah.
That left to right spin move in those first couple years, we saw that, I don't know, 8 or 9 times a game, and
That was his go-to, man. Now Pascal
hmm
Siakam is like the spin move poster boy for the league, except he does not always convert that.
yep. And then also Randall would just be like running over dudes, in the meantime.
That was honestly my favorite part of his game, man. Just when he got the ball in the open floor. Before we got LeBron, he was like, I don't know, he gave me that kind of LeBron like open floor, bull in a china shop, run you over excitement. And that's a big reason why he was one of my favorite young core dudes.
Yeah,
So
he has a very like really poor man's Zion Williamson vibe about him. Like he's
mhm.
very athletic, he's very versatile. He just isn't as athletic and he isn't as strong and he doesn't have the sort of absurd measurables that Zion has, but he's the same type of player, I think, just to a lesser degree.
Which is a testament to how absurd in general Zion is. Just
Yeah,
his
exactly.
speed and
Exactly.
power, because Randall is already one of the biggest and strongest for his size. Not one of the longest, but shit, man, he's like a football player. You just don't want to be in his way when he's charging at you with the ball, man.
Yeah, like that. Either even if you win, there's pain involved. It's never a good thing.
I know, right? That charge is going to be painful. You might not get it, you might get it, but it's going to be a painful charge, man. Anyways, I think that about wraps it up for my thoughts. You got any final words?
I do want to add that I really I noticed that Taylor Horton Tucker has the last couple of games has been really struggling with his finishing.
Oh, the
Um,
dunks, man.
yeah,
It's been a good couple weeks where he tries to get a dunk and like 80% of the time it doesn't land.
and I really think that he's going through those kinds of growing pains. What it reminds me of, to be honest, is again to a much lesser degree, but it's like the first couple of years when Kobe Bryant was really exploring the limits of what he could do at that time and frequently failing.
I had a feeling
Uh,
you're going to say Kobe there because
yeah,
I was thinking like, oh, who's somebody that was like a shooter that was young that would always just go for it no matter what.
yeah,
And yeah, I
yeah,
agree with you,
yeah.
especially when
And
it takes off with Kobe.
as someone who like borderline worships Kobe Bryant, I would not make that direct comparison in terms of talent. But I do think that in
Mhm.
terms of the style of player where he's getting his reps and he's getting a lot of room to make mistakes because of his level of potential. So I would say to Laker fans, like, let this kid screw up as much as he needs to right now, especially during the regular season, because the knowledge that he's getting and the experience that he's getting, he has the potential to be a very special player and a key ingredient to a team that contends for 5, 6, 7 years in the future.
Very
So
special.
yeah, so the kinds of reps that he's getting now where he's making frustrating turnovers or he's missing shots that you're kind of raising an eyebrow at, I think that is the sort of necessary step that he needs to take in order to develop into the player that he can be for us a couple of years down the line, when Anthony Davis hits his peak and then also starts to decline eventually.
I'm with you on that because when THT makes mistakes, he's still 20. I mean, that's just the age giving him the
Yeah,
benefit of the doubt. But I don't mind it nearly as much as when, let's say, Dennis is, the pressure's on him and he just makes a turnover. He's he's a little more older, so I expect a little more of him. Also, he's going to have more responsibility come playoff times, so my level of stress is not nearly as bad when THT makes a mistake. Like you said, it's the regular season. Let the guy make as many mistakes as possible. I say give him as many limits as you can. It's I talk to people about him and they say like, hey, he might be a 20-point per game scorer in the league. I mean, I think that's his floor. He's averaged 16 in April. If he just keeps getting in the right situation, he could hit 20 points a game easily, man. I think you think
yeah,
he's an
yeah.
all-star potential? I think he could be all-star.
I agree with you 100%. 20 points to me is wherever he ends up his floor. He has like to me it is he has all-star potential and his ceiling is superstar.
Bold
Um
names.
yeah,
Superstar.
like if he actually reaches the potential of his instincts and his measurables, he could be a superstar guard in this league. Now that's, people said the same thing about Andrew Wiggins when he came into the league, because of his measurables and potential. So there are a lot of variables that go into that. But if you're looking at him just from what he's doing on the court right now at his age on both ends, he has almost a sky is the limit ceiling if he continues to develop in the way that we've seen him sort of piece by piece in his first couple years.
Mm-hmm. And GMs are catching on to it, man. Masai tried to steal him from
Oh yeah, yep. They know everybody wants a piece of Taylor Horton Tucker, and
they know, but
there's a
thankfully
reason
Rob
they
knows
did not
too.
trade him. Yep, there's a reason they did not trade him, and I would advise fans to be patient because the when guys like LeBron James and Anthony Davis are as excited about this kid as they are, then we should all be excited too.
I know. And hats off to LeBron's abilities as a GM, man. He vetoed that trade, most likely. And I'm sure Rob was also not willing to part with THT, but I got a lot of faith in GM LeBron, dude, for sure. When he's getting LeBron and AD imparting wisdom on him in the sideline, like we saw that so much in the Nets game. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of taking aside, and that's part of the sign of a well-functioning organization too, is that you don't know who to assign credit to.
Mm-hmm.
Because like Genie, Palinka, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Vogel, there are a lot of people who have a lot of credit for the success that's been going on, but no one knows how to assign how much credit to whom because the organization is working so well as a unit. And that's something, especially for Lakers fans who remember what it was like 2 or 3 years ago. That's something that has been a really night and day change. That's super welcome.
And it flipped around quick, man. I still think a lot of the bad stuff we saw LeBron's first year was just Magic just meddling a little bit too much, man. And once he left, we stopped hearing so many leaked rumors to the press. Things have been different, man. It's been, of course, a little bit of luck is always involved in a championship run, but we're doing it the right way, and we got good signs of an organization. And I still have trust in Frank. I still have trust in Rob. Still got trust in our big dogs, and especially after this Nets win, I got trust in our role players, man. I got faith in our defense. Our offense is still shaky, but I still think we're in a good spot, man.
Yeah, once Anthony Davis and LeBron James are back, I think the league ought to be terrified of what this team can do because the the depth and the sort of versatility of skill sets, like this roster is much more versatile and every bit as good defensively as the one that Frank Vogel had last year to work with. And so there's every reason to think that in the playoffs, they will be able to be more potent offensively than the occasionally limited lineups that the Lakers put out last year in the playoffs. And that's something that every team is going to have to deal with, and I'm not sure anyone has an answer for it yet.
We're not sure, man. Really not sure. We still haven't seen enough Dennis and Trez pick and roll, in my opinion. They might still be hunting it, but I don't know. I feel like they should be going for it a little bit more. But hey, maybe that's all in Frank's plan still. It still feels like we haven't seen this team unleashed just because AD's been hurt since Valentine's Day, and we haven't even come to fathom, the power of a Drummond LeBron pick and roll yet. Because shit, man.
Yeah, or even like the LeBron Anthony Davis pick and roll / pop with Drummond in the dunker spot, and then you've got two spacing shooters. Like
Exactly.
The defensive questions there are ones that, like, how are you going to outsmart LeBron James in that situation? And I think the only answer that I've come up with is you're not.
They're always going to leave the shooter a little bit open. They're always going to overcommit on that, that Drummond, that LeBron, that AD. They're just like last year in the playoff run, just like a lot of people were saying, like, all right, they got LeBron and AD, but who do they got 3 through 9 or 3 through 10? And like, we showed you, this is who we got. Thanks for the championship. We'll see you next year.
And they've got better shooters than they did last year. And both Caruso and Kuzma, like, Caruso got a lot of defensive hype last year that he isn't getting this year, but he's been a better defender this year than he was last year. Objectively speaking. Really? Yes. I feel that very strongly. He has been an absolute monster, especially guarding at the point of attack one-on-one. So I think that Kuzma and Caruso are especially going to be really big problems around the margins for teams in the playoff this year, because they're not going to be people that you can attack when they're on the floor with LeBron James and Anthony Davis or Andre Drummond. Like, they're going to be problems you have to deal with offensively around those other guys. I am certain that the smarter coaches in the league are trying to figure out how to deal with that right now, but I hope that for their sake, that they're smarter than me, because I don't see how they can do it.
Especially Kuzma, he can really hold his own much better compared to even last freaking playoff run. I think Caruso, his defense has probably been as good, if not, I think a little bit less effective. His point of attack has been great, but I think he's just been hurt. I think he's a little fatigued from the run, man, because he's also doesn't have Anthony Davis backing him up at the line, which means he can't be as aggressive. But for his ability, I think he's really still held his own. I think he's still an amazing defender. But that was interesting that you said you think he's been better this year.
Yeah, because I think that his instincts are even better because of the experience that he's had. And I'll cite as an example, there was one play, I forget who was handling the ball, but the Knicks had the ball in transition, and Caruso was trying to stop the ball, and he took an extra step and got a little bit out of position because the person with the ball was acting as though he was going baseline to the right. And then when the person with the ball pivoted and went back toward the middle, instead of trying to shift his hips and get in front of him, Caruso just planted his foot and stopped and drew the charge. Like that kind of real-time defensive play and being able to read what the other person is doing is extremely high level intelligence. And I don't know that that's the kind of play that he would have made even last year, just from an intellectual level. I think you're right that he's had some injuries that have limited him, and he hasn't had the kind of rim protection that he had last year. But just from an individual technique standpoint and the kind of impact he's having on the perimeter, I think he is indeed better this year.
I think, experience matters, and he went through a championship run last year, and he's got a little bit more responsibility this year, just in the short term with AD and Bron being out. So I think he's going to be a better defender overall from it. I think he's just been a little physically limited this year, but I still got faith in the team, man. And I think that for real wraps up. We went on a little tangent there, but that was fun, man. Always good to have you on.
Yeah, it's been fun. I took you down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but I hope you had a good time.
Oh, no, always down to go on one. Take it easy, man. We'll be having you back on soon.
All right, good to see you, man. Have a good night.
All right, later.